So the other day I made a video about deconstructing the dualistic mechanism in the visual sense, specifically investigating the non-dual nature of appearance. And someone asked a question I thought that was really good. It's a very simple question, but I think it's worth addressing. The question was, what does this non-dual perception have to do with realization, with awakening? And it's an interesting question. It's an innocent question. If you don't know, I could see how it seems very different. I've said this before too. It doesn't seem like when we're talking about non-duality, we're talking about, in the way I speak about it, we're talking about experience without boundaries and experience without form. It doesn't seem like that is the same sort of work that is like emotion work or shadow work. It doesn't seem like they would be related at all, right? They seem so different. But the funny thing is they're actually directly related. But to understand why and how they're directly related, you kind of have to take it a little bit on faith or maybe instinct until the realization is clear. Because until the realization, especially the deep realizations, like specifically the realization of anatta, until that's really clear, it'll only be conceptual, why this works, how this works, why it matters to investigate the non-dual sense fields and so forth, or the non-dual nature of sense fields. But I can explain it. It's just that it'll be theoretical until the realization is clear, right? But the explanation is simple. It's that I put it in like a personal way, right? Like my book starts out in a very personal way, talking about waking up from the dream of suffering, waking up from the illusion of separation, and so forth. But it's directed at you. You can do this. You can wake up, right? And that's how I try to direct my videos, like to the listener. Like, you can wake up. You can do this. You have the access. You have the capacity. And that's central to any message I sort of give about this generally. And what that means for many people initially is waking up from all of this suffering. Why do I suffer so much? What it also means for some people more than others, what is really happening? Like, what is really real? What is the nature of reality when I'm not distorting it somehow with my mind or with delusion, right? So both of those can only actually be answered beyond the realization of non-duality. And I'll tell you why. The first one, the feeling of suffering, where does that come from? Where does the feeling of suffering come from? Well, let's just say it this way. I'm not going to say like that everything is interconnected and there's this thing called unity. I don't want to like reify that for anyone. But I will say, if you experience this entire world, this entire universe, your entire life, as you are this separate object or subject, and all these other separate objects, people, situations, everything is apart from you, how can that not feel isolating? It does feel isolating. And it starts because of a mental mechanism that starts at about 18 months old, the simple self-reflection, self-awareness, where you actually feel like you are a distinct, separate entity with some kind of longevity, but a kind of limited time frame, right? Once you perceive that, it's going to come with a sense of separation. It's going to come with a sense of urgency. It's going to come with a sense of loneliness. It's going to come with a sense of competitiveness, because it's all dualistic, right? It's relational. All of that just comes with the fundamental sense of a separate self. And probably after, maybe not, I'm not really sure. I can't really say as far as like biologically, but in close relation to the feeling of being self-aware, we have this sense that there's other things, there's other objects. Perhaps you actually become aware of the other before you become aware of the self. It's a little hard to know, but you could become aware that that's my mother, that's my father, right? That's the dog. Maybe before you become aware of yourself, but I'm not sure. Maybe you can't actually, but they're very closely related, right? The feeling of being a separate I, or an I that exists, right? In the way you can think about yourself, and there being separate objects, entities, etc. Those are very intimately related, right? And again, the I causes suffering. That sense of the separate I is just always going to cause suffering. So there's no way you can not experience that as long as the dualistic construct is there. And the dualistic construct, again, as that video describes, appears very real to you. Like right now, it either does or it doesn't. Maybe you've already broken that spell, but look around you. Do things feel distant? Do they feel relational? Do you definitely feel like I'm in here and that's out there, or I'm back here and that's out there somehow? Like there's a 3-dimensional world, there's objects apart from you. If you experience that in a simple way, that's experiencing duality. And that's, as I just described, very intimately tied in our mental processing, our biological development, our emotional experience, our interpretation of our emotional experience. All of that is tied directly into that ability to actually experience the world as separate, apart, divided. Yeah. It's inherently uncomfortable. So you have to break that spell for realization to propagate at deep levels, and specifically liberation. You'll never be liberated from suffering as long as these spells remain. My little dog is so cute. This is Kimura. She's digging into the bed underneath. She wants to lay down, but she likes to dig a hole in the bottom of the bed before she lays down. She doesn't really dig a hole, but she tries. She's very tenacious. She likes to make sure her little nest is perfect. So, yeah, that's it, right? It's that simple. If you experience everything as divided up, dualistic, separate, you're a subject, everything's an object, there's always going to be some sense of separation, isolation, competitiveness. And again, I don't want to say like, okay, everything is just unity, right? I don't want to give you a paradigm, because realization is not about paradigms. It's about dissolving paradigms. But let's for a moment say, if you realize, or if you consider the possibility that the duality is not the fundamental experience, then perceiving yourself as separate or dualistic is going to make you apart from the whole. It's going to make you feel apart from the whole. It's going to make you feel in a way that is not real. It feels unreal. It feels disjoint from truth, or disconjugate from truth somehow, incongruent. That's just what's going to happen, and that's what does happen. And the beauty of this is you can address it. You can address it. You can actually correct the delusions. It takes some work, but it can be done. That's the long and short of it. So you can't pick and choose. A broader thing I would talk about with this is you can't pick and choose how awakening goes. You can't just go like, well, I like this kind of awakening, or I like that, but I don't like the shadow work. That's what most people do. Oh, I like all the psychedelic talk. I like the non-duality and the, all the Buddhist terminology, but shadow work, I don't need to do shadow work. Okay. You will sooner or later, or you'll be stuck in that partially insightful and partially conceptual paradigm and not know it. So yeah, you can't pick and choose how this process unfolds. It unfolds how it's going to unfold. It's like, are you oriented to, or are you committed to actual truth? Or are you committed to the truth you want to be the truth? Which is almost all of religion, right? If it works for some people, it's fine, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about giving yourself over to the process of unbinding all delusion, such that the natural reality, my computer's talking to me. The natural reality just presents itself. That's what we're doing here. So that's it.